He was still smiling when he hit the floor. That's the image that stayed with everyone in that parking lot. Not the movement itself, it happened too fast for most of them to track, but the aftermath. The way the smile was still arranged on Derek Paulson's face a half-second after his body had been introduced, firmly and without negotiation, to the asphalt. Like his expression hadn't received the message yet. Like his face was still living in the world that existed before. That world was gone. Derek Paulson had been the kind of teenager who peaked in the right environment and never quite found his way out of it. At 17 he'd been genuinely impressive, state wrestling champion, full scholarship offers, a physical confidence that read as charisma when it was young enough to seem like potential. He was 31 now. The scholarship had led to 2 years of college, then a series of decisions that had gradually narrowed his world without him noticing. He managed a supplement store in a strip mall. He competed in local submission grappling tournaments, always won against men who'd trained less than a year, and treated those wins with the reverence of a man who had no more recent victories to reference. He was loud in the specific way of men who need rooms to be organized around them. He was charming until he wasn't. He was exactly the kind of man who mistakes a child's presence for a father's vulnerability. That mistake, on a Saturday afternoon in the parking lot of a regional youth judo tournament, would cost him considerably. The tournament was held at a community sports complex 40 minutes outside the city. The parking lot was the particular chaos of youth athletic events, minivans at irregular angles, folding chairs deployed near tailgates, children in GI moving between cars while parents negotiated the logistics of a day that had started too early and would end too late. Thomas Cray had arrived at 8:15 with his daughter Maya, who was 9 and competing in her first tournament outside their home dojo. She was quiet in the car, the way she got before things mattered. Thomas had let the quiet be. He understood it, had felt a version of it himself, in contexts Maya would never know about and didn't need to. He parked. They got her bag. They walked toward the entrance. Derek was parked 2 spots over, loading energy drinks into a cooler in his trunk. He was there with 3 training partners, younger men who had arranged themselves around his energy in the way younger men sometimes do with someone louder and more certain than themselves. Thomas and Maya passed without event. Or should have. Derek noticed Maya's bag first. It was a kid's GI bag, navy blue, her name written on the side tag in her own handwriting, a small embroidered patch from their dojo on the front. Standard. Unremarkable. Except that the dojo patch was from a school Derek knew, or knew of, and had opinions about. Hey. He called it toward Thomas's back. That a Riverside patch? Thomas turned. Looked at Derek. Looked at the 3 men with him. Yeah, he said. Huh. Derek leaned against his car. Heard that place has gotten soft. All technique, no contact. He shrugged, performed indifference. Kid's probably not ready. Thomas looked at him for a moment. She's 9, he said. Sure, Derek said. Still. Maya was looking at the ground. The specific way children look at the ground when adults are making the air around them uncomfortable. Thomas put a hand on her shoulder. Light. Steady. Have a good day, he said to Derek. And walked Maya toward the entrance. Derek watched them go. Said something to his training partners. They laughed. Thomas Cray was 43 years old. He had a face that was pleasant without being memorable, the kind of face that serves a man well in certain professions, where being underestimated is a tool rather than a liability. He was average height, built lean, with the posture of someone who had stopped thinking about posture because it had long since become automatic. He worked now as a logistics consultant. He traveled occasionally. He coached Maya's youth judo team on Thursday evenings and Saturday mornings, not because he needed the role but because Maya had asked him to, and he had learned, in the years since her mother left, to organize his life around what his daughter needed from him. Before the consulting. Before Maya. Before the quiet life in the house with the garden he maintained with the same methodical attention he gave everything, there had been something else. 12 years of something else. Thomas had been a special forces operator from age 22 to 34. He had deployed to places that still appear in news cycles under names that mean nothing to civilians and everything to the men who were there. He had been trained in close-quarters combat by people who designed those systems from first principles, who understood violence not as a physical event but as a geometry problem with a single correct solution. He had not been in a physical confrontation since leaving service. He was not opposed to the concept. He was simply, genuinely, not interested in seeking it out. Derek Paulson was going to make that distinction irrelevant. The tournament ran until 3 p.m. Maya competed in 2 matches. Won the first. Lost the second on points, by a margin that made her cry for approximately 4 minutes in a bathroom with her father standing outside the door, and then stop, which Thomas considered one of the more impressive things he'd seen her do. They walked out into the cooling afternoon. The parking lot had thinned, families trickling out in the post-event exhaust of children who'd spent everything they had and parents who'd spent everything watching them. Thomas had Maya's bag over one shoulder and a half-eaten granola bar she'd abandoned in his other hand. Derek was still there. He'd been drinking, not drunk, but loosened in the specific way alcohol loosens men whose restraint was never architectural to begin with. His training partners were packing the car. Derek was leaning against the trunk, watching the parking lot with the comfortable surveillance of a man who believes all public spaces are his to audit. He saw Thomas and Maya. Something moved in his face. "Hey." He pushed off the car. "How'd she do?" Thomas looked at him. "Fine," he said. And kept walking. "Win?" Thomas didn't answer. "She lose?" Derek called after him. Then, to his partners, "Probably lost." "Soft school." Maya's hand tightened in Thomas's. He felt it. He stopped walking. He stood still for exactly 2 seconds. Then he turned around. He walked back without hurry. That was the first thing Derek's training partners noticed, the men who would describe this later with the discomfort of people recounting something they hadn't fully processed. He didn't stride. Didn't advance aggressively. He simply walked back at the same pace he'd been walking forward, as though the direction had simply changed and the speed was irrelevant. He stopped at a distance that was closer than conversation required. "My daughter," Thomas said, "competed in her first away tournament today. She worked hard. She was brave." His voice was level. Informational. "Whatever you say about her school or her readiness, you say it to me. Not where she can hear it." Derek looked at him. He was 2 inches taller. 30 pounds heavier. 12 years younger. He had won 37 grappling matches in the past 4 years, which he knew precisely because he kept count. He produced the Smirk. The one that had served him reliably in every social confrontation he'd navigated, the signal that said he had decided this was entertainment. "Or what, Dad?" he said. The word again. "Dad." Shaped like a diminishment. Thomas looked at him. "One more time," Thomas said. "Walk away." Derek laughed. Turned to his partners with an expression that said watch this. Turned back. And stepped forward. He threw a collar grab, the instinct of a wrestler, initiating a clinch, intending to control and embarrass rather than injure, because Derek Paulson in a parking lot with witnesses had enough self-preservation instinct to stay on the legal side of the line, or thought he did. The grab didn't land. Thomas's left hand intercepted the wrist, not blocked, redirected, the distinction invisible to anyone watching but immediately and comprehensively apparent to every nerve in Derek's arm. A rotation. A step. Derek felt his balance leave him with the bewildering thoroughness of a man who has never experienced the sensation of his own body being used as a lever by someone who understands leverage better than he understands breathing. He went down. Asphalt. Hard. Fast. The smirk, as noted, remained briefly on his face by inertia. Then it didn't. Thomas was standing over him in a position that was not aggressive, weight balanced, hands at his sides, completely still, but that communicated with perfect clarity that the position Derek was currently in was the position Thomas had chosen for him and could be revised at Thomas's discretion. Derek looked up. Thomas looked down. "Stay there," Thomas said. Quiet. Even. The tone of a man describing a practical arrangement rather than issuing a threat. He turned. Walked back to Maya. Took her hand. None of Derek's 3 training partners moved. This required some explanation. These were men who had trained with Derek for years, who had seen him compete and win, who operated within a social structure organized around his physical confidence. They were not timid men. But something had happened in those 4 seconds that had reorganized their understanding of the situation. It was not what Thomas had done, exactly. It was how he'd done it. The absence of effort. The complete lack of anything in his body language before, during, or after that suggested he had engaged with a physical challenge. He had simply corrected something. The way you correct a calculation. The way you move a piece on a board. There was no adrenaline in it. That was the part they couldn't name in the moment. There was no adrenaline, and men who train understand what adrenaline looks like, and its absence in a physical encounter means something specific about the man in whom it's absent. It means they have done this before. Not in a gym. They stayed where they were. Maya waited until they were in the car. "Dad," she said. "Yeah. Who taught you that?" Thomas started the car. "Some people I used to work with," he said. She considered this with the particular seriousness of a 9-year-old who senses she's at the edge of a larger story. "Were they good?" Thomas pulled out of the parking space. "They were the best," he said. She looked out the window. Processed. "Better than Derek Paulson?" Thomas almost smiled. "Yes," he said. "Better than Derek Paulson." The aftermath moved through channels Derek hadn't anticipated. One of his training partners, a 24-year-old named Cole who had filmed a portion of the parking lot on his phone out of reflex before understanding what he was watching, spent the drive home in a silence that concerned the others. Cole had a younger sister. He had a father he respected. He had watched a man defend his daughter's dignity with a restraint that the situation hadn't required and Cole hadn't expected. He didn't post the footage. He thought about it for 3 days. On the 4th day he showed it to the head coach at their gym, a decorated competitor named Harris who had forgotten more about martial arts than Derek Paulson had learned, and whose opinion Derek publicly valued and privately feared. Harris watched it twice. He said nothing for a moment. Then, "Who's the man in the gray jacket?" Cole didn't know. Harris watched it a 3rd time. "Find out," he said. What Harris found out, through the specific network of people who know people in this world, coaches and competitors and veterans who move between those circles, took 4 days and produced a name and an approximate history that Harris absorbed in his office with the door closed and the particular respect of a man who knows exactly what he's looking at. He called Derek in the following Monday. He showed him the footage. Derek watched it with the expression of a man who has been hoping a thing didn't exist and is now confronted with its existence. Harris told him what he'd learned about Thomas Cray. Derek said nothing. "That's not the point, though," Harris said. Derek looked at him. "The point," Harris said, "is a 9-year-old girl walked past you and you decided to make her day smaller. And her father asked you twice to stop." He paused. "You represent this gym when you're out there. You represented us in that parking lot." The silence in the office had texture. "You're suspended from competition team for 60 days, Harris said. "You'll spend those 60 days assisting with the children's program. Tuesday and Thursday evenings." He looked at Derek steadily. "You'll learn something." Derek started to speak. I'm not negotiating, Harris said. Thomas Cray coached Thursday evening practice 2 weeks later. Maya was on the mat with 12 other children, running a grip fighting drill she'd been struggling with for a month. Thomas watched from the edge, correcting quietly, moving down the line. His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Short. My name is Derek Paulson. I was in that parking lot. I owe you and your daughter an apology. I don't expect anything from this. Thomas read it. Set the phone in his pocket. Watched Maya work the drill. She got the grip right. Held it. Looked up at him. He nodded once. She went back to work. He replied to the message that evening, after Maya was in bed, in the quiet of the kitchen with a cup of tea he'd forgotten to drink. Apology received. Teach the kids well. He sent it. Closed the phone. Sat in the quiet house. The garden was dark outside the window. The neighborhood settled into its nighttime sounds, a dog, a car, the particular piece of ordinary life running its ordinary course. Thomas Cray sat in it. Let it be enough. It was more than enough. It was everything he'd built the last 9 years to have. If this one reached something in you, if you've ever watched a quiet man absorb nonsense patiently, and then stop absorbing it, and felt something in your chest release, this channel exists for that feeling. Subscribe. These men are everywhere. Their stories deserve to be told. The next one is already waiting for you.